The future hero of this story was born on February 4th, 1967 in Philadelphia, a city long considered one of America's toughest basketball centers. Here, talent alone meant almost nothing. To earn recognition, one had to prove their superiority on the court every single day. It was in this atmosphere that Hank Gathers grew up. He was raised in a normal family where no one promised an easy life. The neighborhoods of Philadelphia were known for high crime rates, constant competition, and harsh conditions in which teenagers had to grow up quickly. For many, the street became a trap, but for Hank, the basketball hoop became the main place of attraction. He spent almost every free moment with a ball. While his peers rested after school, Gathers continued to train. He practiced shots, worked on his footwork, perfected his rebounding, and learned to fight for every centimeter of the court. Even then, those around him noticed one peculiarity. While most talented players relied on natural gifts, Hank wanted to surpass everyone specifically through hard work. It soon became clear that he possessed a rare combination of physical qualities. At about 2 meters tall, he was unusually fast for a power forward, jumped excellently, felt confident under the basket, and still managed to return to defense. His energy seemed endless. Even at the end of training, when his teammates were already asking for a break, Gathers continued to work as if he had just stepped onto the court. After entering Dobbins Technical High School, he immediately became the focus of local coaches. Each season brought new reasons to speak of him as one of the best young players in Pennsylvania. He didn't just score points. He grabbed a huge number of rebounds, managed to block opponents' shots, constantly pressed, and literally infected his teammates with his dedication. Especially impressive was that Hank never played just for beautiful stats. If the team was losing the battle under the basket, he was the first to rush for the ball. If he needed to defend against larger opponents, he did not retreat a step. Such a style of play quickly made him a favorite of coaches and fans. They saw before them a man who never saved his energy. With each year, his name sounded louder and louder. Philadelphia newspapers began regularly mentioning the young forward among the most promising school children in the country. Representatives of universities came to his matches, carefully recording every action on the court. Some admired his incredible physical power. Others noted his discipline and desire to constantly improve. Almost everyone agreed on one thing: this guy's potential significantly exceeded the level of high school basketball. By that time, Gathers was already considered one of the most sought-after graduates of his generation. Many experts were confident that a brilliant career awaited him. They saw a player capable of becoming a star of the college championship and then getting a chance to secure a spot in the NBA. Such forecasts rarely sounded so unanimously, but in Hank's case, almost no one had any doubts. However, he did not allow praise to change his attitude toward work. Even when interest from universities became huge, Gathers continued to adhere to his previous regime. Each training session remained an opportunity for him to become stronger, faster, and more resilient. He understood perfectly well that the real path was only just beginning, and school successes guaranteed nothing at the next level. When it came time to choose a university, the doors of several prestigious basketball programs opened to him. For any young player, this was a moment that could determine his entire future career. Hank had to make a choice that depended not only on his future in college basketball, but also on the path to his main dream: one day stepping onto the court of the world's strongest league. The choice fell on the University of Southern California, USC. At that time, it was one of the most famous basketball programs in the country, regularly attracting the best school players. It seemed that it was here that Hank Gathers would be able to take the next step to the NBA. Another talented basketball player from Philadelphia, Bo Kimble, joined the team with him. At that time, no one could have guessed that their friendship would become one of the most famous in the history of college basketball. However, Expectations quickly collided with reality. At USC, both young players did not get the role they were hoping for. The competition within the team was huge. The coaching staff rarely trusted newcomers with enough playing time, and the style of play did not allow Gather's strengths to be revealed at all. Instead of rapid development, disappointment appeared, and the feeling that his career was stalling before its real start. Hank was not used to looking for people to blame. He continued to work with the same persistence, remained one of the most disciplined players in training, and hoped that everything would change. But month after month, it became obvious. In this system, he would not be able to show what he was really capable of. Bo Kimble found himself in the same situation. The two friends discussed their future more and more often and realized that they were losing precious time. They came to the university to become leaders, but instead remained second-string players. The decision matured gradually, but at some point it became obvious. They needed to start over. So they took the difficult step and transferred to Loyola Marymount University in Los Angeles. According to NCAA rules, after transferring, both were forced to miss one season of official matches. For many young athletes, such a pause becomes a serious blow. Some lose form, others lose self-confidence, but not Hank Gathers. While the stands could not see him play, he used this time to work on himself. Every day was scheduled almost by the minute. Strength training, running, endurance exercises, shooting work, perfecting back-to-the-basket play, rebounding, defense. He did not perceive this year as wasted. On the contrary, he considered it an opportunity to prepare himself for a real breakthrough. It was at Loyola Marymount that he met the man who completely changed his basketball destiny. The head coach of the team was Paul Westhead, a specialist with quite unusual views on the game. A few years earlier, he had led the Los Angeles Lakers to an NBA championship and then decided to build a university team according to his own principles. Most coaches relied on long positional attacks and cautious basketball. Westhead saw the game completely differently. He demanded constant movement, maximum speed, and continuous pressure. His philosophy was simple. The more possessions, the more opportunities to score points. The team had to attack almost without stopping, not allowing the opponent to catch their breath. Many considered such a system too risky. Some experts even called it madness. But Paul Westhead was convinced that for players with high endurance and a desire to work, it could become a real weapon. When the coach saw Hank Gathers in training, he realized almost immediately that he had a basketball player perfectly suited for such a style before him. Huge energy, incredible physical power, the ability to accelerate across the court again and again and fight for every ball. All this turned Gathers into a player who was extremely difficult to stop. Very soon, it became clear that, together with Bo Kimble, they were capable of creating one of the most dangerous duos in college basketball. While most opponents were just trying to get used to the crazy pace of Loyola Marymount, this pair was already starting to turn every game into a real challenge. And it was then that America first truly learned the name of Hank Gathers. When Hank finally got the opportunity to return to the court in official matches, it was obvious that the year of waiting had not been in vain. He returned as a completely different player, more powerful, more confident, and much more mature. It seemed that everything he had worked on during the forced pause was now manifesting in every game. Paul Westhead's system revealed his strengths almost perfectly. The team played at an incredible pace, constantly ran into fast breaks, aggressively pressed, and was not afraid to exchange points with any opponent. Loyola Marymount matches increasingly turned into real basketball shows, where the final score often exceeded 200 points scored by two teams combined. In this chaos, many players got lost, but Hank felt like a fish in water. While the others began to tire, he continued to run around the court with the same energy. He managed to be the first under the opponent's basket. A few seconds later, he was already fighting for a rebound at his own hoop, and then rushing again in a fast break. It seemed his energy reserves simply had no limits. Very quickly, he became a true leader of the team, and not just in points scored. He dominated almost all components of the game. Rebounds, blocked shots, steals, fighting for loose balls. His presence was felt everywhere. Teammates knew if the ball was near Gathers, there was a high probability that possession would remain with Loyola Marymount. Bo Kimble continued to play a special role. The two friends understood each other almost without words. They grew up in the same city, went through a difficult period at USC together, and started a new chapter of their careers together. Now their interaction looked almost automatic. One opened up for a pass, the other already saw that moment. One started a fast break. The second instantly supported the attack. Opponent defenders had to watch two future stars at once, and this often ended in failure. With each month, interest in the team only grew. Journalists came not just to watch another university match. They wanted to see basketball that seemed completely unusual for its time. Loyola Marymount played faster than most opponents, scored a huge number of points, and made the whole country talk about them. But the main object of attention gradually became Hank Gathers himself. His statistics looked impressive, even by the standards of the best NCAA players. He regularly posted double-doubles, and he finished some games with figures that seemed almost incredible. At the same time, he never looked like a person obsessed with personal records. After every game, he first of all spoke about the team's victory and emphasized the contribution of his teammates. The real breakthrough happened in the 1988 to 1989 season. It was then that Gathers became the first player in the history of the first division of the NCAA to finish the season as the country's leader in average scoring and number of rebounds simultaneously. He averaged over 32 points and almost 14 rebounds per game, an achievement that remains unique to this day. After such a season, talks about his future were no longer limited to college basketball. Increasingly, the question was not whether Hank would make it to the NBA, but how high he would be picked in the draft. Many experts believed that he could be among the top picks. His combination of physical data, character, and versatility looked exactly like what professional clubs were looking for. Scouts came to almost every Loyola Marymount match. In the stands, one could see representatives of several NBA teams carefully following Gathers' every move. They noted not only his powerful play under the basket, but also a rare desire to fight for every ball, regardless of the score on the scoreboard. It seemed that the road he had dreamed of since childhood was opening up before him. A little more, and the name of Hank Gathers should have sounded at the draft of the world's strongest basketball league. But it was at the moment when his career was rapidly going up that an event occurred that at first seemed like a normal, unpleasant episode. No one could have imagined then that this would become the first warning of a much more serious problem that was already quietly developing inside his body. During the 1989 to 1990 season, the Loyola Marymount team continued to play at its trademark crazy pace, and Hank Gathers remained its main engine again. He still spent a lot of time on the court, fought for every ball, and looked like a person who could not be stopped. From the outside, it seemed that he was in the best shape of his career. But one day, the usual course of a match was unexpectedly interrupted. On December 9, 1989, during a meeting against the UC Santa Barbara team, something happened that no one expected. After one of the game episodes, Gathers suddenly lost consciousness right on the court. For the spectators, it all happened in a matter of seconds. A moment ago, he was participating in the game, and then he ended up on the floor without movement. A tense silence fell in the hall. Teammates immediately rushed to Hank, coaches called a medical team, and fans watched what was happening, not understanding how serious the situation could turn out to be. Fortunately, after some time, he regained consciousness. He was immediately taken to the hospital, where a thorough examination began. Doctors understood that such an episode in a young athlete could not remain without explanation. After a series of tests and special studies, cardiologists diagnosed hypertrophic cardiomyopathy. This is a disease in which the heart muscle becomes abnormally thickened. Because of this, it is harder for the heart to work under high physical exertion, and the risk of dangerous rhythm disturbances increases significantly. In the late 1980s, such cases were studied much worse than they are today. Modern diagnostic methods were not yet so developed, and recommendations for admitting athletes to competitions were only being formed. Despite this, the doctors understood perfectly well that the diagnosis was very serious. Hank faced a difficult choice. Basketball was his entire life. Months were left until the fulfillment of his main dream, and now there was a possibility that his career could end before the NBA draft. To reduce the load on his heart and reduce the likelihood of repeated episodes, doctors prescribed a drug belonging to the beta blocker group. Such treatment was supposed to stabilize the heart rate and make physical exertion less dangerous. At first, it seemed that the situation was brought under control. Hank returned to training, then began playing for Loyola Marymount again. Fans breathed a sigh of relief when they saw him on the court, and the team regained its leader. But very soon, another problem appeared. The medicine did indeed help control heart function, but at the same time, it noticeably affected Gather's playing qualities. The basketball player, who used to literally fly around the court, began to feel that his body was reacting completely differently. His movements became less explosive, his usual speed decreased, and the feeling of constant energy, which had always been his main advantage, gradually disappeared. For an ordinary person, such changes might seem insignificant, but for an athlete whose game was built on power, speed, and continuous movement, even a small loss of physical capabilities was felt very painfully. Hank saw this not only himself. The difference was noticed by coaches, teammates, and specialists who regularly watched his game. The basketball player, who had recently been considered practically unstoppable, did not look as dominant as before. It was then that a heavy struggle began inside him. On one side were the doctor's recommendations and the need to protect his health. On the other, the dream for which he had worked since childhood. There was very little time left until the NBA draft, and every match could influence the opinion of scouts. Hank understood perfectly well that if he continued to play noticeably slower than before, his chances of being picked high could decrease. The desire to become that same unstoppable Gathers again proved too strong. After consultations with doctors, the dosage of the drug was reduced to minimize its influence on his physical form. This decision allowed for the partial return of his usual speed and aggressiveness on the court. It seemed a compromise had been found. Hank began to play with more confidence again, the team continued to win, and talk about his future in the NBA began to sound louder and louder again. But no one could have known then that the most difficult trial awaited him very soon, and there was much less time left until it than anyone near him could have imagined. On March 4, 1990, in Los Angeles, no one expected that a regular second-round match of the West Coast Conference tournament would go down in American sports history. Loyola Marymount was preparing to meet the Portland team. For Hank Gathers, it was another opportunity to help his team and take another step toward the main goal of his entire life. The arena was gradually filling with spectators. The fans came to see one of the most spectacular college basketball teams. No one suspected that in a few minutes, the holiday atmosphere would be replaced by deep shock. The match began in the habitual Loyola Marymount style. High pace, fast attacks, constant pressure on the opponent. Hank looked focused and, as always, completely immersed in the game. At the very beginning of the meeting, he managed to open his scoring account. Then he won the fight under the basket, made a spectacular dunk, and ran back to defense. From the outside, it seemed that everything was developing quite normally. The fans saw the same Gathers who infected the entire team with his energy. A few minutes had passed since the beginning of the game. During one of the episodes, Hank headed to his half of the court. There was no hard collision, dangerous fall, or blow from an opponent. Everything happened unexpectedly. His steps became less confident. Then he suddenly lost his balance and collapsed on the parquet. At first, many decided that he just slipped or twisted his ankle. Such episodes happen in basketball regularly. But within a few seconds, it became clear. The situation was much more serious. Players from both teams stopped immediately. The referees instantly interrupted the meeting. The coaches ran onto the court, and the medical team hurried to the lying basketball player. An almost complete silence reigned in the stands. Thousands of people who had recently been noisily supporting the teams now silently watched what was happening. No one understood exactly what had happened, but the expressions on the doctors' faces spoke for themselves. Teammates stood nearby, not hiding their anxiety. Bo Kimble took what was happening especially hard. They had traveled the path from the Philadelphia school courts to being a university star, experienced failure at USC together, and built a new team at Loyola Marymount together. Now, he helplessly watched as doctors desperately tried to help his best friend. The medics immediately began resuscitation measures right by the court. Then Hank was taken to the medical center as quickly as possible, continuing to fight for his life on the way. Meanwhile, the match was permanently stopped. Basketball no longer interested anyone. Players, coaches, journalists, and spectators waited for at least some news. In the hospital, doctors tried for a long time to stabilize the athlete's condition. All available emergency aid methods of that time were used. However, the damage caused by the heart disease turned out to be too severe. After some time, the medical team had to report the news that no one wanted to believe. Hank Gathers could not be saved. He was only 23 years old. The news spread across the country almost instantly. On that very day, the largest American TV channels interrupted their programs with emergency bulletins. Newspapers were preparing special editions. Sports radio stations completely changed their broadcasts. And journalists who had recently discussed his prospects in the NBA draft now spoke about the biggest tragedy in college basketball for many years. The family, teammates, and coach Paul Westhead were especially pained by this loss. A few months ago, they were making plans for the future together, discussing the upcoming draft, and were confident that the best pages of Hank's career were still ahead. But now, Loyola Marymount faced a completely different question: to continue the season without their leader, or to end it right now. And the decision that the team made forever became one of the most emotional pages in the history of the NCAA. After several days of heavy deliberation, the team made a decision that many initially thought was almost impossible. The Loyola Marymount players decided to continue performing in the NCAA tournament. They understood that no victory could change what had happened, but they were sure this was exactly what Hank himself would have wanted to do. It was not an easy decision. Each training session now reminded them of the person who had been nearby just recently. His place in the locker room remained empty. His uniform no longer appeared on the court. Players admitted that at first, it was difficult for them to focus even on the simplest exercises. Emotions constantly prevailed. Bo Kimble took what had happened especially hard. Hank was not just a teammate for him. They had been friends since their teenage years, grew up in Philadelphia together, went through a failed period at USC together, transferred to Loyola Marymount together, and dreamed of one day ending up in the NBA together. Their stories were so closely intertwined that many fans perceived them almost as one whole. But it was Kimble who became the person who managed to unite the team in the most difficult moment. Before the first match of the national tournament, the players agreed that they would play not only for themselves, but also for their friend. Each victory was to be a tribute to the memory of the person who helped make Loyola Marymount one of the brightest teams in the country. During the first-round meeting against New Mexico State, a moment occurred that forever entered the history of American basketball. Hank Gathers was right-handed, but he performed free throws with his left hand. He believed that he was more stable that way. Bo Kimble decided to honor his friend's memory in an unusual way. Having received the right to the first free throw, he unexpectedly moved the ball to his left hand. The whole hall froze. Almost no one expected such a gesture. Kimble threw exactly the way Hank used to. The ball went through the hoop accurately. Applause broke out in the stands. Many spectators could not contain their emotions. This episode became one of the most famous symbols of memory in the history of college sports. After that, Bo performed free throws with his habitual right hand, as allowed by the rules. But the first shot of that meeting remained special forever. Meanwhile, the team itself continued to surprise the whole country. Despite the emotional shock, Loyola Marymount demonstrated basketball that seemed incredible. The players acted with the same speed to which Paul Westhead had accustomed them. It seemed as if each of them was trying to compensate for the absence of their leader with double dedication. In the second round of the tournament, they confidently defeated the reigning NCAA champion, the Michigan team. Many specialists called this result one of the loudest sensations of that season. Then followed a victory over Alabama, and Loyola Marymount entered the Elite Eight of the national championship for the first time in its history. All of America followed this incredible campaign. Even people who had previously been little interested in college basketball began watching Loyola Marymount matches. For millions of viewers, this team became a symbol of resilience, friendship, and devotion to a person who was no longer there. The fairy tale story ended in the quarterfinal of the national tournament. The future champion, UNLV, one of the strongest teams of its time, stood in the way of Loyola Marymount. Despite the desperate fight, it was impossible to stop such an opponent. The final buzzer marked the end of the season. But almost no one spoke about the defeat. Everyone understood that this team had already accomplished something much more important than just a successful performance in the tournament. It managed to turn a huge personal tragedy into a story that for many years became an example of courage, unity, and true friendship. And although the basketball season ended, Hank Gathers' influence on the sport was only beginning. His story forced doctors, coaches, and competition leaders to look at athlete health in a new way, and the consequences of these changes are felt even today. Hank Gathers' story did not end on that March day. On the contrary, it was after what happened that it began to change basketball. His case became one of the most famous examples of how dangerous hidden heart diseases can be in young athletes. Universities began to pay much more attention to medical examinations, and cardiologists began to actively study the risks associated with hypertrophic cardiomyopathy. Gradually, many NCAA programs strengthened control over the state of players' health, and recommendations for admission to competitions became significantly stricter. Hank's name was often heard at medical conferences and in scientific publications devoted to sports cardiology. His tragic story forced many specialists to think about how to prevent such cases in the future. Perhaps it was thanks to these changes that it was later possible to save the lives of other athletes whose disease was discovered in time. Despite the fact that Hank never had the opportunity to play in the NBA, his name forever remained part of the history of American basketball. At Loyola Marymount, he is still considered one of the university's main legends. Fans continue to remember not only his outstanding play, but also his human qualities. Teammates said that he never put himself above the team, was always the first to arrive at training, and the last to leave the hall. Bo Kimble repeatedly admitted years later that the loss of his best friend changed his entire life. For thousands of fans of college basketball, Hank Gathers forever remained a symbol of incredible talent, huge hard work, and a person who fought for his dream until the end. His story reminds us, even today, how thin the line can be between major sporting success and tragedy. And lastly, the promised little-known fact. Many are sure that Hank Gathers did not have time to leave significant records behind. In fact, this is not true. In the 1988 to 1989 season, he became the only player in the history of the first division of the NCAA who finished the season as the leader of the entire country in average scoring and average number of rebounds per game simultaneously. Decades later, no one has managed to repeat this unique achievement. That is why specialists still consider Hank Gathers not just one of the most tragic figures in the history of college basketball, but one of the most universal players of his generation, whose career could have become truly great. Hank Gathers never managed to realize his main dream, to step onto the NBA parquet. But his name did not disappear with the last match. It remained in the history of college basketball as a symbol of huge talent, incredible hard work, and a person who never gave up. His story forced the sports world to take heart examinations for young athletes more seriously, and many medical recommendations appeared precisely after the analysis of such cases. Today, Hank is remembered not only because of the tragic events of 1990. He is remembered as a player who could have changed an entire era. Perhaps he would have become an NBA star. We will never know that. But one thing is known for sure. Decades later, the name of Hank Gathers continues to live on, and his story still touches the hearts of millions of basketball fans. And lastly, a little-known fact. Many believe that the main legacy of Hank Gathers was the tragic story of his last match. But there is an achievement that remains unique to this day. In the 1988 to 1989 season, he became the first, and to this day, the only player in the first division of the NCAA who simultaneously finished the season as the leader of the entire country in average scoring and the number of rebounds per game. He averaged more than 32 points and almost 14 rebounds per game. Over the decades of college basketball's existence, no one has been able to repeat this record. That is why specialists consider Hank not only one of the most tragic figures in the NCAA,